On this channel, I talk about trains, specifically trains in India. One question I regularly get asked about travel in general is why the train? This question seems pretty simple on the surface and a personal decision made by one person or a family. However, when you dig deeper, you find that this is one of the most complex questions you can ask, depending on who you are trying to answer to. Taking the train might sometimes just be as good as a bus or a flight, or maybe all the options are so bad that it's just not worth traveling. However, we are not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about why trains from the perspective of a government, state, or country, as in why a government or state body should invest in railways. I'll explain why this matters, but first we need to look at what a government can do. Contrary to what a lot of people think, what people think and do has a surprising amount to do with what the government wants them to do. It's literally part of running a country. Everything from taxes to subsidies, public benefits to essential services are all part of this. And running a transportation system is no different. Governments have a lot of tools at their disposal to control what you choose, not by forcing you to do something, but by imposing a penalty for not doing it. I realize this sounds quite vague, so I'll give you an example. Let's say, hypothetically, that I am running a country. I have many people in my country that smoke. I recognize the health risks related to smoking, and so I don't want my people to smoke. Now, telling people outright to not smoke might cause riots or protests. So, what I can do is levy an increased tax on all tobacco products. This makes them more expensive and less attractive to consumers. In addition, the revenue generated by this tax can be used for better healthcare infrastructure, which will be needed because too many people are smoking. On top of this, I can force cigarette packets to include a photo or depiction of some gross looking disease that may be caused by the cigarettes, further discouraging people from buying them. So, with a few of these policies, I have discouraged a lot of people from using cigarettes. This is just one way in which a government can encourage or force you to do something that you may not do otherwise. Once you start looking for stuff like this, you will start finding them everywhere. Now that we have a basic understanding of how governments can encourage or discourage their citizens from doing something, we realize that this applies to transport also. In fact, this is one of the few sectors of the economy that are most affected by government policy. Since most transport infrastructure is also general infrastructure, governments can have a lot of control over how you travel. To look at two examples of this, let's go international for a bit. Let's look at a journey that is 40 to 50 kilometers long between a small town or village to a nearby city. We shall take two examples of this and see how they differ. Firstly, let's go to the USA. In the city of Phoenix, I've picked this random house and I want to go to the airport from here. This 40-kilometer journey will take me 27 minutes if I drive, with pretty much no restrictions. If I choose to take public transport, it will take me over 2 hours at best. I first need to walk about 10 minutes, which is fine, and wait for a bus that only arrives every 40 minutes with no alternate route. Then I need to change to a tram that also only arrives every 40 minutes. Not to mention, along the way, I'll be walking along places that look like this. Now let's go to Germany. Let's say I live in this random house in the town of Ingelheim near Frankfurt, and I want to visit this park in the city. If I choose to drive there, it will take me 43 minutes to cover the 52-kilometer distance, but the route involves restrictions to vehicle size. If I choose to take public transport, I can take a direct train from the train station at Ingelheim to a station in Frankfurt, from which the park is a short tram ride away. Not to mention, on top of all of this, Germany has a much higher car ownership cost due to the taxes on internal combustion engine vehicles, and even getting a driver's license there is expensive. Note here that though public transport route in Germany still takes longer than driving, it is clearly not to the extent we saw in the USA. Most people will look at this and point to the differences between these places. You may say that the German place has a train station and the Phoenix location doesn't. You may say that I've picked a place in the USA intentionally that has bad public transport. You might say that Germany has more trains or that people are just more used to riding public transport there. The important thing to realize is that everything I've just mentioned is a choice. The choice that governing bodies make. The city of Phoenix made the choice to run a tram that arrives every 40 minutes. The German government chose to fund Deutsche Bahn to run train service to the town of Ingelheim. The city of Frankfurt chose to keep the tram route that took us to the park. The city of Phoenix chose to make the widest roads known to humans so that car travel is the fastest option. These external factors that contribute to one method of transport being preferred over another are all in control of governments. In fact, to discourage driving, many cities, especially European ones, levy a congestion charge for vehicles driving into the city. That is a choice. Adding cost to driving and subsidizing public transport is a choice. Letting buses rot and expanding flyovers to make driving easier is also a choice. Now, so far with my examples, I've been pretty narrow, only comparing driving to local public transport, but this principle applies to intercity travel also, where the primary competition to railways is usually competing local buses on shorter routes or airplanes. I realize I did not compare the speed of airways in this video, but that's a completely separate video that's coming because it requires more context to understand. So hold your comments for that. One more important thing to note here is that travel time is not the be all and end all of transport options. For many people, in fact, for most people, having a reliable but slower option that they can take regularly is much better than having an option where you might get stuck in the middle of nowhere, even if it's technically faster. The experience of travel matters. If I need to choose between a 2-hour flight and a 10-hour sleeper train, I'm probably going to pick the sleeper train because, in addition to the comfort of being able to lie down, I get the added benefit that I don't spend any effective time during the travel because it's time I would have spent sleeping anyway. A lot of these comforts and decisions are subjective, but they all lie on a spectrum. Making a mode of transport more appealing and attractive will produce growth in ridership. One last thing before we move on, I'm not going to be talking politics in these videos, even though public transport is inherently a very political topic. I'll be presenting you with concepts which you may choose to apply however you see fit. I hope you will understand these things for what they truly are, rather than forwarding or arguing against any kind of narrative that someone might have. It's taken a surprising while to get to trains in a video about why trains over everything else. Now, there are several YouTube videos discussing why train travel is the best form of transport overall for a society. But there are very few such videos discussing these in an Indian context. Videos linked in the description can be applied, they are just not exact. One quick note before we move on, I suggest you watch this section in full before commenting anything that I missed. Also, I am not comparing Indian railways to Indian roads in this video. I am just comparing what a railway is capable of and what roads are capable of. And by extension, airways also. Just because something is implemented badly is not an excuse for the technology itself being bad. To start with, we must realize that a train is not the best mode of transport for every type of journey. Transportation is a complex issue and requires complex and systematic solutions. A 2-kilometer trip to the nearest park and a 60-kilometer trip to a town far away cannot have the same solution. In general, the length of the intended trip decides the mode of travel. Buses are suited for last mile or local travel, where the bus drops you within walking distance of your final destination. Trams may be used for a higher tier bus style service. They serve the same kind of trip but enable longer journeys and are slightly faster. Local or suburban rail and metro rail systems occupy the tier above, catering to journeys in the 15 to 60-kilometer range, with them becoming more effective the longer the journey is. Above that, you have regional rail options or intercity bus routes catering to 60 to 200-kilometer long trips. Above that, you have intercity rail, high speed rail, and flying. Now, one thing you might have realized here is that a train or some form of it serves the widest range of travel destinations among any mode on this list. The reason for this is not one particular feature, but trains and by extension trams offer a unique combination of benefits and costs that ultimately makes it work almost everywhere. Let me explain. Firstly, trains can move a lot of people. And by lot, I mean a lot. I don't think people realize there's enough. This is what gives trains the best advantage above everything else. More specifically, trains have the highest moving capacity per land area occupied. Again, sounds quite vague. Let me explain. On a typical suburban rail line, let's assume that trains run every 6 minutes, which is 10 trains per hour. Every coach on such a train can carry 150 people, including standees. And by the way, this is not assuming Mumbai local train level crowds. Each of these coaches has 98 seats, so the coaches are full but not bursting. On a 12 coach suburban train, 150 people per coach is 1800 people per train. Therefore, in total, that is 18,000 people per direction per hour. By the way, this is on one track since this figure is per direction. If you calculate this both ways, the numbers will be double. Not to mention, this is not even pushing things to the limit. We are only running trains every 6 minutes. If you upgrade signaling and allow trains to run at 2 or 3 minute headways, the capacity numbers triple to 54,000 people per direction per hour. For context on how much that is enough to completely empty Gandhinagar Stadium in just over 2 hours by just using a train. Nothing else. Comparing these numbers to roads, a typical highway lane under ideal conditions moves around 1,500 vehicles per hour. Again, ideal conditions. Assuming that there are two people now on each vehicle as an average, that's 3,000 people per hour. So, to match our one train line, you need 18 lanes of traffic per direction under ideal conditions. You might point out that roads can be widened and you can add more lanes. To that, I would reply you can also widen a train line by adding more tracks. If your road is 4 lanes, then you should be comparing it to a train line that has 4 tracks. Also, one lane of road and one train track occupy roughly the same space. This includes supporting infrastructure as well. This would include for roads, parking, traffic signals, roundabouts, and interchanges. And for trains, it would include maintenance facilities, signaling, and operational buildings. Given land area is the single biggest cost factor in building anything these days, this should be a no brainer. Trains win. Now, this alone should be enough evidence to convince someone that trains are good. But now, let's discuss something that's more relatable: speed. Many people perceive roadways as being very fast you know, because they are. I don't know why, but there is one problem with speeds in roads: traffic. Everyone here is deeply acquainted with waiting in traffic, cursing every government employee and office one can think of. Aside from the deeply Indian issues with our roads are fundamentally bad at moving people. The capacity is only one part of the issue. On the other side, there is something called demand. The more people a roadway moves, the slower it is at doing so. This makes sense on the face of it, but there is a related and more dangerous form of demand that is a little harder to understand. I suggest you watch this video to learn more or wait until the end of this video. It requires more context to understand. Let's talk accessibility. This is quite a broad topic and warrants a full video in itself, which I will be making. But let's look at it in different forms, in brief. First, economic. Public transport is by far the most economically accessible form of transport, be it buses, trains, trams, trains, or ferries. This is because the rider pays a small fare rather than buying and maintaining their own vehicle. And the cost of running such a system is cheaper on a per person basis because all the costs are spread out among all fare payers and taxpayers. Thus, economically, public transport, by extension trains, beats everything else. Now, physically speaking, which includes people in wheelchairs, people with hearing and vision disabilities, public transport wins again. People in wheelchairs and those with hearing or vision disabilities cannot drive. So they have to get around by walking or spend a fortune on taxis, which again worsens the economic barrier problem for those people unfairly. Plus, if you design it right, a city can be set up to be navigated by anyone from being blind, deaf, or in a wheelchair. And unlike with the roads, established solutions to these problems already exists. I suggest you watch this video if you are thinking that technology will get us out of this. So, accessibility, public transport, as in trains, trams, buses, so on, win again. Next up, environment. There's this thing called climate change. This is by far the broadest topic where trains shine the most. I suggest you read this article for the details, but I'll save you the trouble. Road transport has a very high crash rate, contributing huge fatalities. Road rage and intentional violence are really easy way to cause huge damage to others. In terms of pollution, brake dust, tire wear, microplastics, and rubber flying all over the place. Especially disposal of rubber and the large amount of e-waste due to proprietary electronics causes huge pollution. Sedentary travel, as in not physically moving while traveling, causes a huge number of health issues from obesity to reduced bone strength. Incidentally, for which I recommend you watch this video. Next up is the large amount of wasted land for the capacity, as we discussed earlier, but it's repeated here because that land that is used by cars cannot be natural land. It cannot be used for anything else. It has to be covered in tar, and cars destroy any life along it, whereas trains don't, and plants can literally grow between gaps in sleepers. Not to mention, this exists. All of this is even before we get into carbon emissions, which is why electric cars won't save us, by the way. Again, watch these if you please. You compare this to, say, a railway, you have almost nothing. Trains themselves can last about 50 years, at least twice as much as a car. They use primarily metal construction, and 90% of the vehicle can be recycled and reused to make new trains. Not to mention, they're electric, and not the additional problems that come with being electric, such as slave labor and bomb threats. In saying all of this, I shouldn't gloss over the intermediate solution to this that we have found in India: two wheelers. These are comparatively fine and an excellent alternative to cars, but we should try not to overuse them, as even two wheelers cannot compete with the space efficiency and sustainability of running a railway. Maybe buses, but not trains. Next up, we have infrastructure life. I realize this sounds quite vague, but I'll put it this way: no other form of transport destroys the infrastructure in regular use as much as road vehicles do. Even if maintained perfectly, roads only last 25 to 30 years, after which they need to be resurfaced or rebuilt. It is possible to make a road that lasts longer, but it's significantly more expensive not to just build it, but it's more expensive to maintain also. Compare this to a train line. If you maintain a railway properly, it can last truly like hundreds of years. Not just because there isn't a large running surface, the running surface is just the small rails, but all the materials used in such a place are recyclable and largely don't involve petrochemical products such as tar. Steel is the primary material used in railways, followed by concrete, both of which can be recycled. Not to mention, given the capacity problems we discussed earlier, if a road and railway move the same number of people and goods, the road will cost approximately 25 times the cost of the railway, both in terms of building and maintenance. So far, we have discussed all of these problems from the context of roads, but it's about time we realize that this applies to planes as well. The huge land required, janky accessibility solutions, often requiring extra employees, high cost of entry, and the aforementioned environmental issues, some of which are less severe and some of which are worse, just make air travel as bad as driving. The only difference with air travel is that there are actually routes where it makes sense. In highly remote places with very low population density and freezing climates, it often doesn't make sense to build a railway. Not that one cannot be built, it's just the capacity provided is not necessary. And on really long routes over oceans specifically, airplanes just make the most sense. Decarbonizing air travel is far from a reality right now, and the additional pollution problems are also not going away. The only good thing about the aviation industry compared to roadways is that they are keen on reducing the amount of material they use, so it makes them easier to recycle. Anyways, all the environmental problems I've mentioned are summarized in this nice graphic from the research paper I mentioned earlier. You can spend time staring at this, but I'm going to move on. One last category I need to mention: noise pollution. We all know how loud a train station is and how loud standing next to a road or airport is. I'll let you be the judge here. I personally believe the train station to be less annoying because the noise inside a train station is usually the noise of people and not engines. I don't know which one you would rather listen to. However, outside a train station, the train line is objectively quieter. You'll only hear sounds of passing trains when a train is actually passing, which is usually just a couple of times per hour. And even when you do, the sound from a train is more metal clinking compared to a road, which is a constant loud whine of countless engines. Also, by the way, electric cars won't solve the noise problem as tire noise becomes worse as the cars go faster, and because electric cars are heavier, their tire noise is more. So they are not actually quieter than ICE vehicles. Now, back to the dangerous form of demand I was talking about. This is demand that is generated by building or widening of any transport infrastructure. Think about it this way: if a new piece of road is built or widened, people tend to reorient their lives around it. If the road allows you to live in a quieter, more rural place, people generally take that option. But in doing so, they are adding one more vehicle to that road. If enough people do this, this newly widened road that was built to make travel faster is going to become filled and traffic jams are going to get worse. The road will flow smoothly for a while, maybe like around 2 years, maybe, and then traffic starts to hit. This phenomenon is called induced demand, and its effects are generally seen within 10 years of the new transport link. If a road is widened, or a flyover is added, or if a traffic light is removed, or if the road is made faster or have more capacity in any way whatsoever, more people will come to use it. The only case where this doesn't happen is when the population itself is so small they cannot physically fill the roads, which is not the case in India, by the way. Also, this demand doesn't just apply to roads. Because of its effects, this is the single biggest factor by which governments can control the use of roads and public transport. Because any new transport link is going to induce demand towards itself. Why would you build the most space inefficient, loud, polluting mode of transport to handle it? This is the virtuous cycle of expanding roads. As long as you keep expanding roads, you will need to keep expanding roads. The only way to solve traffic is to provide viable alternatives to driving. Those alternatives need to be practical and attractive to the people switching away from the road. You may say that trains have this demand problem also, which yes, they do, but that's where their excess capacity becomes actually useful. You can absorb a lot more induced travel demand on a train line than a road, not to mention all the other problems with roads we've discussed before. I've linked you to some resources that can help you learn more about induced demand. The examples are from foreign countries, but their findings apply here also. Deciding to reduce car dependency and making our travel less polluting over building more roads is a choice that government bodies make. This is the choice I was talking about since the start of the video. Every rupee we choose to not spend on railways is one more delayed train, one more stain of good car, one more smelly bathroom, one more waitlisted ticket, one more broken glass, one more ticketless passenger in reserved coach, and one more car sitting in a traffic jam. All these are problems caused by chronic underinvestment. Railways don't make money, but they can win more votes more consistently than any other scheme. It just takes a while to get going. These things take years to fix, but our governing bodies need to face it and take the decision. This video contained more about cars than trains, surprisingly, but I hope I've convinced you or at least given you a few reasons as to why trains are just better. Over the course of this video, I've linked you to many videos from this YouTube channel, Not Just Bikes, which is an excellent place to have your mind blown away by common sense. I can definitely recommend. One thing I did not talk so far about is the implication for the climate, despite the environmental problems. Here again, we need another change of mindset. Instead of thinking about sci fi solutions and waiting for technology to solve everything, we need to get back to basics. If we are burning excess fossil fuels, the best way to reduce that is to reduce our energy consumption, not just in terms of having a more efficient vehicle, but by not having that vehicle in the first place. This is why this discussion is important. Cars waste so much energy, not just in themselves, but because of all the infrastructure that they need to operate. Parking lots, wide roads, flyovers, junctions, all of these spread out all of our infrastructure and destroys valuable farmland. And the very fact that everything is spread out increases energy consumption in general with regards to heating, cooling, water supply, drainage, and sewer systems. In contrary, along a train line, your development will be very different. It will be concentrated near train stations, and no one would need their own motor vehicle, as you could take a combination of train, bus, and walking to go pretty much anywhere. Sometimes the solution is right in front of you. It may sound boring, but it's the best one we have, and it's one that is getting better. We just need to have the guts to implement it. Transportation is a complex issue and it requires complex solutions. No magical technology will save us. Trains, trams, and buses will. I felt this was a change of mindset everyone needed to have, especially for civic authorities, but it applies to citizens also. We need to take back our cities from the automobile industry and make our living more sustainable. If you're thinking of buying a car, I can't stop you, and I won't blame you for doing it. Because whatever I describe that public transport is capable of is not what happens in India. Despite the benefits of railways I've shown, public transport in India sucks. We know why. It's because of underfunding and corruption. But more importantly, we need to know what to demand from our railways and how to extract the fullest potential. We need to know how to spend our money. Nobody here has taken the time to know how efficient a railway operation can be, or at least the people who do know are not given the chance to implement their solutions. This is the point of this channel. I don't claim to know everything, I'm just learning as you are. But I think I've learned enough to help. I think I've learned enough to share my thoughts and point my finger at one thing to say if it's good or if it's bad. You may not agree with me, but that's kind of the point. I'm here to share my knowledge and to learn more from you. If you want me to cover anything specific, leave your suggestion in the comments below. Thank you for watching. I shall meet you in the next loop line.
பயணிகள் கவனத்திற்கு வண்டி எண் 1, 2, 6, 8, 6 மேங்களூர் சென்னை சென்ட்ரல் சூப்பர் ஃபாஸ்ட் எக்ஸ்பிரஸ் வழி